Jaxson Dart threw for historic numbers. I mean, historic. And that wasn't the story of the ball game.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, Rebel Nation. I am your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. Today on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, we're diving into the complete demolition of the Furman Paladins. While Jaxson Dart's historic night was nothing short of spectacular, the real story of the game was the new look defense led by star transfers like Princely Umanmielen, who played more than we thought he would, and Walter Nolen. The defense slammed the door on Furman's offense, making the game look like the mismatch that it was. Thanks for joining us on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available in all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is. And do not forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC, or even Corey Burton, fresh off the big win for Vanderbilt over Virginia Tech, of Locked On Vandy. They provide other perspectives around college football, the SEC, and even Ole Miss, honestly. So check it out. 5 Hour Energy fixes tired fast. With zero sugar and convenient portable sizes, it is perfect. The perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. Go to 5hourenergy.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCFB. That's all one word to receive 20% off your order. The offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. So Jaxson Dart had one of the most unbelievable halves of football that anybody has ever seen. You can probably count on one hand in the history of college football when a performance like that happens. I mean, Andre Ware probably did something like that when he threw for like 900 yards against SMU in 1990s-ish. Joe Burrow obviously had a couple of games where he was the last quarterback that threw for over 350 yards and a half. He didn't throw as many as Jaxson Dart did. Jaden Daniels did some crazy things as well, as people like to point out in the comments. But it's been 20 to 25 years since somebody has done what Jaxson Dart did against Furman before. That's Joe Burrow. That's everybody. And that gets everybody excited. And that should be the storyline of the game. But the storyline of this football game was the defense led by like Walter Nolen and Princely Umanmielen that was able to really affect the game. This is what we learned. The Ole Miss defense performance made a historic performance by Jaxson Dart, not the story of the game. But Jaxson Dart is as locked in of a quarterback as I've seen since Joe Burrow in college football. Ole Miss's offense has a chance to be fairly special this year. And the run-pass ratio this year, it's interesting, and this is a data point that I think we need to pay attention to. In the past, it's been 60-40 run to pass. Last night, it was 45-55 run to pass. So that was a very pass-heavy offense. Now, we're not sure if that was because Furman had issues on the back end of their defense. We talked about this leading up to the game. Or if the Ole Miss talent lies in the wide receiver unit and the quarterback position. That's all interesting stuff. But those are the three things that we learned from this game. But when you look at the defense, they completely shut the door. Let's just talk about some stats. Furman had 7 first downs in the game, 2 of them on the last 2 plays of the game, 2 rushing, 5 passing. They had 26 yards rushing on 30 attempts, 20 of that or so on the last 2 rushes. They ended up gaining a total of 78 yards trying to run the football, but they lost 52, and that wasn't sacks. I think it was 2 for 10 yards on sacks over the course of the game. That was just stopping the run in the backfield, and they did that quite a good bit. Passing the ball, Furman threw the ball for 146 yards. That is the result of 3 busts in the secondary that led to about 80 to 110 yards. I'm not exactly sure of the amount, but if you take that away and you take away the last 2 plays of the ball game, this is a situation where Ole Miss's defense actually allowed about 40 to 50 yards of offense over the whole course of the ball game. Pete Golding's unit was special over the course of the night, and they dominated when the starters were in there. They dominated when the backups were in there, and they dominated when the freshmen were in there. Whenever you look at this is Kam Franklin's number. He played some defensive end in the game. He had 5 tackles, second on the team over the course of the game in tackles, had 3 TFLs and 1.5 sacks with 1 quarterback hurry during his limited time playing in the game. Kam Franklin had a really good night, and my goodness, how good can this kid be? And then you had Chris Paul Jr., Pooh Paul, who essentially played angry. And it looked like he just played angry that he had to play in the fourth quarter of games because he came in as a backup behind Kari Coleman and TJ Daugherty at linebacker. Chris Paul played like an angry man possessed in this game, and it all came out. He had 8 tackles, led the team, 2.5 tackles for loss, a half sack. He did have a quarterback hurry as well. You know, these are 2 of the main performers that I was thinking of from the game, but we can't forget about like the Trey Amos. Trey Amos, before things got weird and they took all of them out there, he looked like he was going to be a lockdown type cornerback. He did some excellent man cover stuff. Now, athlete to athlete, we have to take that into account. And as they get a little bit better and better, we'll see how it looks. Walter Nolen was just a monster in the middle of the defense. I could not possibly be more impressed. And then Princely Umanmielen played more than we thought he would. Whenever he had the surgery after spring, if everybody remembers that listens to my show every day, I said if this was something they had to worry about a timetable, he would have had his surgery during the spring instead of not missing practice. So not missing practice lets you know that they probably had a good idea of how to get him back. But everybody, the black jersey, when they talk about injuries, when it comes to injuries, you just don't know what it looks like. You don't know the truth. If Lane volunteers information, odds are he's lying. And he generally doesn't answer the question if you ask him. So you can't take injury information at face value. You can take a lot of stuff at face value with Lane, but you can't take energy information. So it's pretty interesting type stuff. This defense was good. It was legitimately good. It was a situation that I talked about when Ole Miss had struggled in games like this previously. It's been because of the defense. They've been able to figure out a way to move the football and score on Ole Miss's defense. This year, they couldn't do it at all. Even when Ole Miss has scored 70-plus points in the past. Last year, they scored over 70. They scored over 70 in 2018. They scored over 70 in 2015. Whenever they do that, the defense gives up points as well. I think there was a game against Southern Illinois or something that Ole Miss ended up scoring 70 points, but they gave up like 28. They did the same thing to UTEP. They did the same thing with Tennessee Martin. They did the same thing with Southern Illinois. They did the same thing just a year ago against Mercer as well, to where Mercer scored on the first play of the game. There was a bust to where they were able to score against the defense. That didn't really happen. Even when Ole Miss busted a coverage, a play that could make things interesting for Furman as an offensive unit, the door got shut almost immediately because of the talent difference between the Ole Miss side and the Furman side. And we'll see exactly how that goes. I walked out of that game thinking, man, it is nice to have land sharks again playing defense. And Chris Paul, he is very good. He celebrates whenever he makes a good play. We got to learn how to do the land shark, buddy. The land shark from this defense needs to come back. When you celebrate, it needs to come back. I've seen Jared Ivey do it a couple of times. It needs to come back. This defense was really legitimately good. They looked like prime 2012 Alabama, prime 2018 Georgia. This defense looked dominant against an FCS program, which they do. And also, before we take a break, people are going to try and poo-poo on this and say, hey, this is an FCS opponent. You're supposed to do this. Okay, answer this whenever they ask you that. When was the last time you beat somebody 76-0? When was the last time that happened? When was the last time you had a quarterback throw for 400 yards and a half? When was the last time all of this stuff happened? And they're not going to be able to answer you because it didn't happen, which means if they say, hey, you're supposed to do this, well, this means that their win against an FCS opponent does not hold enough water because they did not do this. And they probably likely have not done this in quite some time. Should be really interesting this weekend. We're going to turn the page. Hey, tonight, John 4K talking about it. And then we're going to move on tomorrow to our keys to Middle Tennessee. We'll talk about the lines for that in the third segment today. Up next, we dive into Jaxson Dart's historic performance and what it means for him and how it could shape the future of Ole Miss football. Don't go anywhere, everybody. Grab a 5-hour energy shot to stay alert, to watch all of your favorite football games, or stay up late to catch that intense overtime game. If that happened, take one the next morning so you have the energy to start your day. 5-hour Energy is the brand hardworking people like you have been using for over 20 years to give you an alert, energized feeling that they need to get through the day. You always know where to find 5-hour energy shots, right at the cash register at nearly every convenience, drug, and grocery store. Stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious, energizing 5-hour energy shots. And if you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5, hourenergy.com, and get some 5-hour energy product today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all one word, to receive $20 off your order. Now, this offer is only valid until September 30th, and it's only good for one order, and it can't be used with other promotions. And it's not good on subscription orders. But go to 5hourenergy.com today. College football is back, and it's not too late to catch up before the weekend's action. If you're in the SEC, ACC, Big 10, or Big 12, you can get all the info from Locked On's stable of college football experts by subscribing to the Locked On College Football Podcast. Who has a chance to make the playoff? What teams will cause chaos in their new conference? Everything you need to know all in one place. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the Locked On College Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Now, the other story that we talked about, Jaxson Dart had himself a day, like legitimately had himself a day. He was 22 of 27, 418 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. That is a game that probably 5 people have had in Ole Miss history. But here's the catch. That's a half. He did that in the first half of football. If he would have played the full game and played the full game the way they played the first half, he would have thrown for 900 yards in this game. He would have had 10 touchdowns. It would have been a game very Andre Ware, Houston Cougars-like against the Furman Paladins. A really good quarterback. It was one of those situations to where this has happened exactly, I think, in 25 years or so, this has happened once. And that was Jaxson Dart against the Furman Paladins. That was the last time that it had been done. Joe Burrow threw for over 350 yards and a half. And I think Jaden Daniels did some weird stuff over the course of the game for the total offense record and things like that. And we all know what Johnny Manziel was able to do when he was at Texas A&M. But none of them did this. Everybody plays FBS teams. Everybody plays the schedule to where you're going to have ups and you're going to have downs. And if you have never done it against an FCS team, keep their name out of your mouth because you can't say anything about it because you've never done this. Now, Joe Burrow is a very good quarterback, and Jaxson Dart honestly reminds me a lot of vintage Joe Burrow coming into the football season. But do not poo-poo what happened just because it went against a FCS program. And by the way, just so everybody knows, there's going to be a lot of gaslighting this week a lot of real that everybody's going to say is like just an FCS opponent. Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Alabama, A&M. No, all FCS programs do not mean the same thing. Just like no FBS programs mean the same thing. There is a massive difference between Furman and Alabama A&M and Arkansas Pine Bluff. And honestly, Murray State. All of them, Furman would probably beat by 3 touchdowns, 3 to 4 touchdowns. Furman's a legitimately good team. They've won 10-plus games and were an FCS playoff team last year. They're a good, well-coached team, and that shouldn't be taken away from them just because of the acronym before their name. Now, they do have some limitations, but they might be better right now than the team that Ole Miss is going to play this weekend. That's just the truth. But because Middle Tennessee is an FBS program, nobody's going to look anything weird about that. Now, Ole Miss opened up as a 39.5-point favorite over Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee probably has better athletes in certain positions, but with Derek Mason, you're running into a situation like you had at Vanderbilt, where it takes a little bit of time to implement for him to get good. You want to catch Derek Mason in year 1. We'll talk about this all in year 3 or segment 3 as well, but it's really interesting, and just don't have much patience for people poo-pooing an FCS game, because they don't do it in their FCS games, and their FCS opponents aren't as good as who you just played. There's very few teams that are going to play better FCS teams than what Ole Miss just did. That's just the absolute truth. Now, Ole Miss was up 52-0, I believe, at halftime. I'm not even joking about that. 52-0. In the second half, it was the Austin Simmons show. Austin Simmons was the backup quarterback, like it was predicted on this show for multiple weeks. And his first pass as an Ole Miss Rebels was a 35-yard touchdown. That was pretty cool. Austin Simmons, over the course of the game, was 7-16, 111 yards, and 1 touchdown. Now, the completion percentage is probably concerning, but just remember Eli's freshman year when he backed up Romero, he had a sub 50% completion percentage as well. That's just the way this works for young quarterbacks. And the first time they go in, they can be amped up from time to time. Some other star performers from this football game that deserve recognition. Matt Jones, 3 carries, 68 yards, 2 touchdowns. Somebody comments on Matt Jones in my comment section at least once a week. I don't know if he's a relative. I don't know exactly who it is, but he does. The last time he said Matt Jones is going to be Ole Miss's leading rusher. He said that after the first game, Matt Jones is Ole Miss's leading rusher. Now, a lot of that has to do with the fact that when Jaxson Dart's in the game, they throw the football. And I think that's going to happen quite a bit. And they're going to use the running backs out of the backfield and stuff like that. But Matt Jones had 3 carries, 68 yards, and 2 touchdowns versus the Furman Paladins. And that probably needs and at least deserves a little bit of a mention. And at wide receiver, you have Trey Harris, who had 8 catches, 179 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He narrowly missed a 3rd touchdown at about 30 more yards as well. Trey Harris was very good in this game. And again, not coverable, especially from somebody in the FCS level. If Ole Miss would have kept throwing the football, they could have scored 100 points in this ball game. Really, really interesting stuff. I like what I saw from Jaxson Dart. I like what I saw from the offense. They do a good job of formationally stacking up the tight ends and putting them on different sides. I do want 12 personnel, especially down in the red zone. That's kind of, anybody that's listened to my show knows that 12 personnel is my thing, but the offense was clicking. Ole Miss ended up with 772 yards on the game, 529 through the air, 243 on the ground. It was good enough. And that's honestly the way I thought the 243 would happen. I would have liked to see them ground and pound and kind of enforce their will and things like that. But whenever they were scoring at the ease that they were throwing the football, there's no way that anybody can ask them to change from doing that. That's just the way this works. Coming up next on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, we're diving into the Week 2 betting lines and breaking down all the games from around the SEC, from the biggest matchups to the under-the-radar games. We'll cover what you need to know to stay ahead of the curve. Stay tuned. Hey, Locked On Ole Miss fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love as much as I do. It's called Ultimate College Football HC. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of the Ole Miss Rebels? Heck, we just watched the football game. Of course you can. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And of course, we have a special offer for the Locked On Ole Miss fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com, ultimate-cfb.com, or look it up on the App Store. Ultimate College Football HC, begin your legacy today. So the betting situation this week, the last game and the last set of odds that hit the board was the Ole Miss game. Now, this is going to be the return of the no-line type weeks as well, where the FCS versus FBS games, there might not be a line because there's probably a line later in the week. But in week one, that was a little bit different. That's the reason we knew that Ole Miss was a 42.5-point favorite over Furman, which, lo and behold, was about 30 points too low. But it is what it is. It's hard to see what's going on there. But if you look at the betting line games in week two, the headlining game of the week is Texas is favored by 6.5 points at Michigan in the Big House. That's the big noon Fox game, and it's being played in Michigan as a reward for like part of Texas leaving the Big 12. They figured out a way to negotiate with Fox so they can make a little bit of money because of how much Texas ads are worth. Texas at favored by 6.5 is interesting. Arkansas is at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's favored by nearly 10 points. Double-digit road dogs are interesting. Let's see which direction this line goes. McNeese and A&M and Tennessee Tech and Georgia, they're no-line type games. Like I said, the FCS, FBS games are going to be no-line games now. California is an 11.5-point dog to the Auburn Tigers, who put 70 up on Alabama A&M. Shout out to Zach Blackerby. I'm sure he's having a great time. The first conference game of the week and of the year, South Carolina is at Kentucky. South Carolina did not look good against Old Dominion. Kentucky, you can't really tell if Kentucky looked good because of the lightning delays and everything, to where they ended up just canceling the game and giving Kentucky the win in the third quarter. Yeah, you don't know exactly what you have with the Wildcats either. Ole Miss is a 39.5-point favorite over MTSU. That is, you've heard me correct, a 39.5-point favorite over MTSU. MTSU needed a touchdown with 15 seconds left. I think it was a 30-yard touchdown to beat Tennessee Tech, 32-25 last week. Now, the biggest improvement of a football team is between week one and week two. Everybody's heard that adage. So I'm expecting the MTSU team that is a little bit better than what they showed against Tennessee Tech. But that adage is also for the team that won 76-0. South Florida is at Alabama. Bama is a 28.5-point favorite in that game. This is going to be a revenge game of what happened down in Tampa last season. This is going to be a revenge game. Buffalo is at Missouri. I do not have the line on that one just yet. Whenever I have that, I will relay. Sanford is at Florida. Nichols is LSU. Those are no-line games. Tennessee's favored by 6.5 in Charlotte against North Carolina State in the Duke's Mayo Classic. It's probably a neutral site game, but it's North Carolina State in North Carolina, or North Carolina in North Carolina State, or whatever. Is probably a home game for the Wolfpack, even though Tennessee is right next door. Alcorn State is at Vanderbilt. It's a no-line game. Houston is at Oklahoma. Oklahoma's favored by 27.5 points. Mississippi State's at Arizona State. Arizona State is favored by 2.5 points. And those are your week 2 lines. I want to take a moment before we get going. Looking back, we learned other stuff besides the betting line and all that as well. First of all, Vandy looks like an SEC football team. Beating a Power 4 opponent for the first time since 2018 or something like that from the non-conference. Winning the game in a way that is very un-Vandy-like. I'm glad personally that Ole Miss does not play Vandy because everybody knows how scary that game can be traditionally. But I really like Diego Pavia. I like the fact that their defense plays aggressive. I like that they play with an edge. And they just kind of at the beginning just swallowed Virginia Tech to the point where it was 17-0, and you were beginning to wonder if it was about to turn into 31-0. Credit to Virginia Tech for getting back into the football game. But credit for Vanderbilt for making plays after they blew that 17-0 lead. They were down 31-24 or something like that. That is interesting stuff. I like what I saw from Diego Pavia. I like Clark Lee and Jerry Kill, the emotion that I saw at the end of the game. This Vandy team is, I think, free money was the Vandy over-under, which was at 2.5 points. Now, other games over the course of the weekend, Florida's in trouble. Florida's in all kinds of trouble. There's going to be sharks swimming around that program for the foreseeable future. It's just the way it works because Miami just went into the swamp and put them down. Absolutely nutso. And then you look at the games like Alabama, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Auburn, Texas A&M dropped the game against North Carolina. Connor Weigman did not look particularly good. He looked okay a year ago, but he did not look good in this game. The SEC overall, though, had a pretty fantastic first week. And Georgia just completely boat raced Clemson, but that was to be expected anyway. Really great stuff. But what we learned more than anything else is Ole Miss is for real. They are a national championship contender. They're an SEC title contender. This offense is special, and this defense is beyond really good. I don't know if they're elite, but they're great. And put those two together, and Ole Miss is going to win a lot more games than they're going to lose. And I think Ole Miss fans can take solace in that, and it should be a lot of fun for them. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the number one Ole Miss podcast, and thank you for that. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day. Now go check out Locked On College Football Podcast. From NIL deals to the never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't even need to search. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, exciting news. You can now become a Locked On Ole Miss insider, the best and the easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports. Link is down in the description. It's a texting program that sends you notifications on anything relevant without the hassle of message boards filled with trolls. Enjoy a 14-day free trial and experience the future of college sports coverage. We're adding new perks as we grow, so don't miss out. The link is down in the description. For those watching on YouTube, we are going to send you to Locked On College Football, Locked On College Sports right now. Howdy toddy, everyone.